Right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're back for another episode with us again of Property Law Alliance. We joined once again by Cilna Steyn today. She decided so.
I wouldn't say once again. It's we're joined by Steyn. Like it's a big thing. You need
Yeah.
yeah.
He's almost become a guest speaker with us.
Like we have a celebrity.
Yeah.
You guys are funny. It's like it's just that last cousin that doesn't, arrive for Christmas 5 years in a row. The ones that's been there committedly. When I rock up, you're like, oh wow, thanks so much for coming. But thank you guys for always being here while I'm busy doing other stuff.
Yeah. So definitely we're back treating us with expert and valuable information again. So we've got 3 questions today. I will just layer them out nicely, and then Sona and Bruno can then obviously jump in and deal with all 3 of them. Sona, the first question is very straightforward, and it deals with the viewer would like to know that if or the landlord would like to know if they catch a tenant stealing power, can they actually evict the tenant?
That's very naughty, but yes.
and straightforward. I'm not sure that's actually straightforward.
It could be straightforward. So the straightforward way of stealing power is obviously either the tenant breaches the meter and they have a prepaid meter and they're breaching that. Other options, obviously, not being supposed to tap power from the neighbor, something like that. So there are various elements to this question. On the one hand, it's obviously a criminal offense to steal power, not because of the stealing element, that as well, but actually interfering with power supply, especially on the national grid, is really a criminal offense. It's also super, super dangerous. It's scary. We all know exactly what it looks like when people steal power and you just see cables hanging between houses. Shockingly dangerous, and that pun was in fact intended. So it is really a dangerous situation, and nobody should ever steal power. But if you have a tenant that is breaching the meter, be it a prepaid meter or a municipal meter, whatever the case might be, the thing is, any interference with the electrical supply to the property, in terms of your lease agreement, you will always have a provision that says the tenant may not do anything that is going to increase the landlord's risk to the property. It would say something like, would increase the insurance premium or would pose a risk for insurance. Remember, the moment you have a property that isn't being run, the electricity in the property isn't run the way it's supposed to be running, it poses a massive risk to the property itself, the actual building, because there could be a short and the place could burn down. Your insurance won't pay for that because you're not supposed to tap electricity from the neighbors. So that in its own is already breach of the agreement. If you have a provision in your lease agreement, and I really hope that you do, that says any criminal activity in the premises would then allow the landlord to cancel the lease agreement, that's another reason to cancel the lease agreement based on stealing electricity. And obviously for the landlord to turn a blind eye to this is I'm going to stop saying a shockingly horrible idea. I've overused my pun now, but it's really a bad idea because A, your property is at risk, and B, you are eventually going to be the party that's going to be responsible to pay for that electricity, because it does link back to your property, and on transfer or at some stage it will pop up and it will be a problem for you. So you have to address it. Whether you place the tenant on terms and give him a time period to rectify this breach, or whether you go straight for cancellation, would depend on how he's breaching the electricity and how he's stealing the electricity. If he is tapping electricity from the neighbor, it's a clear criminal offense, and that could amount to immediate cancellation. If it's just a naughty breach of the prepaid meter, then I would rather give him time to rectify his bridge.
Yeah.
And only if he doesn't, then I will cancel. So it's about how exactly this power is getting stolen, and how I would react to that.
So maybe, Cilna, maybe just elaborate a little bit more on the summary termination.
Okay, so summary termination of a lease agreement is something that I am very cautious about. So I won't advise the landlord to jump into that one, all guns blazing and cancelling. Where you can cancel is if there is a criminal activity taking place on the premises that you are aware of, and it is placing the neighbors and the tenants and your own property at risk, you would be able to do an immediate cancellation in a case where your lease agreement allows for that. Yet, even if your lease agreement allows for that, it is a gray area. The reason why you would be allowed to do that is obviously if it poses a risk to the point where when we start weighing up the rights here, if somebody is cooking crystal meth in the kitchen and there is a lot of criminal activity taking place in the property because of this, there's a good reason to do an immediate cancellation. If somebody is breaching a prepaid meter, there's no immediate risk. There is something that can be remedied. So we need to look at irreparable harm. Irreparable harm would be somebody is, running some of the other criminal activity from the property, and it could lead to death or injury, serious bodily injuries. Then you would be able to do an immediate cancellation, because the moment we start weighing up those rights, it's easy to say, well, the thing is, we had to stop this immediately. We had to get these people out of the property because they were posing a massive risk to the neighbors, and your responsibility as an owner of a property obviously relates to your duties as a neighbor. If it is a tenant that's been irritating you and his criminal activity, in your opinion, is that he shoplifted that one time, I mean, that doesn't pose, yes, that's a criminal activity, but it doesn't pose a risk to the neighbors or anything else. You can't say, yeah, but you're worried that he's now going to steal something from the neighbors. There you have to place him on terms. So it depends on what it is and how great the risk is that it actually poses to the neighbors as well.
It's actually funny. So it's the second week in a row we talk about cooking crystal meth. So well done, and well done with that example. No, and I totally agree. I totally agree. That's why I actually mentioned it, because I've had a very similar question, and one of the challenges was, well, in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, it's a breach, send out notice. And we went so far as to argue, okay, but evictions are allowed in certain circumstances. If we can make them fall under these circumstances, there may be a way to evict someone urgently, as an example. But going back to that example, so last week we actually managed to take like a couple of criminal offenses and compare them and say, well, crystal meth, but for yourself, maybe not that serious unless you're going to burn down the place. Receiving a bag of stolen cell phones, you're going to struggle with that. But, having a whole like criminal activity, then actually selling drugs on the property, that's a lot more dangerous. So yeah, to what Cilna says, the facts do matter. Yeah, so it's really about that detail.
I suppose Nick had a lovely story about tenants burning places down with crystal meth. If he didn't tell the story,
he didn't mention a specific story. No, he didn't.
Oh, we had a matter like that where I'm so surprised. I'm gonna make him watch this one now. We had a matter in SSLR. It was probably about 5 years ago or so, and tenant called in to the office and said he's very upset because his landlord, the kitchen burnt down, and the landlord doesn't want to repair the kitchen. So I listened to the whole story, and I'm like, okay, but this is weird, because I mean, when a kitchen burns down, it's very much there's a rent reduction. There's definitely landlord's responsibility. so I started asking a few questions like a good lawyer would, and eventually it came out that the reason why the kitchen burnt down was that particular tenant was cooking crystal meth in the kitchen and burned his own kitchen down. And I'm like, my friend, I'm sorry, you're right. The landlord doesn't have to repair this one, but I suggest you vacate. I can't believe Nick didn't tell the story, but that's why they have me. I'm the storyteller.
Nice.
Right. So yeah. So thank you. Well, there you have the answer to that question. Nicely, broadly put. But obviously, it always goes back to the specifics and the details and the merits of each question that we always have to consider when doing evictions, and just to stick up to legislation and all the necessary stuff.